Hello YouTubers, and welcome to my video analysing the trumpet solo by Vince Jones over the song Comes Love from his 1987 album It All Ends Up in Tears. This is of course from the perspective of a jazz guitarist. So I transcribed this solo because I really like this solo. It's full of some really nice note choices and really nice phrasing, so I thought I'd learn to play it, and because I've found it a really interesting solo, I thought I'd share some of my ideas with the solo with you. So the first thing I think I should do is I'll just play through the solo as it is, as I've transcribed it, and then after that we'll look at each line and talk about what he does. So this is how the solo goes. It starts at 1 minute 19 into the recording. So let's start looking at the solo line by line. So I should have mentioned before, this song is in the key of A minor, and he's pretty much just going back and forth between the A minor chord and the E7 chord. It's not quite as simple as that, but for the sake of function, that's pretty much what's going on. So the first bar is really just a lead in before the double bar line where the top of the form starts, where it's an E7 chord, and he just starts on an E note and goes down the A harmonic minor scale and then hits that A note on beat 1 of the top of the form, the root note of the chord, and then goes up the scale. If you listen carefully, he sort of really drags it. One of the things I really like about this solo is how he sort of push and pulls with the time and the feel, and this is one of the examples. This phrase here, he sort of pulls with the time there, but he nails beat 1 on the next bar perfectly, and then he finishes off the phrase by playing a couple of notes out of an E7 chord. And you'll notice when you listen to the solo, his long low notes are really breathy, which gives a lot of character to the tone, and that's another reason why I think he's probably playing a flugel rather than a trumpet. So let's move on to the next line. So still on an E7 chord, he starts off that G sharp note, just plays a nice cool little line there, but it incorporates the sharp 4 and resolves that back down to the 4. Now this is really interesting. We're in the key of A minor, but he starts the next phrase on a C sharp note. The reason I think he's playing a C sharp note is it's the 6th of the E7 chord. He immediately resolves that C sharp to a C natural, and then goes down an A minor arpeggio through the sharp 4 and ends up finishing the line on an E note. And again, this is another time where he really pulls on the time. He really drags that phrase, particularly that chromatic run in the middle there. Now on to the next line. He starts on an E note and goes up to G sharp, which you would think would be a great pair of notes for an E7 chord, but of course that's at the point now where it's gone back to the top of the 8-bar block, the A section, and it's an A minor chord. Now that G sharp that he plays there, his intonation is really, really sharp. It's almost a quarter of a tone sharp, so it's a G sharp and a quarter. About there. And the next phrase, simply down an A minor arpeggio after a little grace note, up to the B flat, flat 9, holds that bit of tension. I guess it's the sharp 4 of the E7 chord, which he then resolves to the 5 of the E7 chord, the B natural. And he sort of slurs into that B natural. On to the next line. So this phrase here, it's really, there's an F major 9 arpeggio in there. Anyway, he starts with this E note. It's almost as if it's half a beat long, but not quite. It's almost staccato. There's definitely some air in between that E note and the G note. But I didn't want to really notate it as an eighth note. I still think it feels like it's a full quarter of a beat long. There's just some gap in there. There's the arpeggio. And then it comes back down that arpeggio to the G sharp and the B note of the E7 chord. Then, here's a nice colour tone, he plays the F sharp note and just holds it. And one of the things he does with that F sharp, he sort of gives it a bit of a crescendo, which I can sort of do. I'm playing a Gibson L4 into a Fender Blues Junior, so I can get just a little bit of feedback there to simulate the crescendo that he's getting on that note. Now that last B note of that line really belongs to the next phrase, so let's move on to the next line. So the next phrase, it's got the B note from the previous line down to that D sharp, and then now there's another E7 arpeggio, but the interesting feature here, there's that C sharp again. So that's why I'm thinking when he's using the C sharp that he's thinking of as the 6 of the E7 chord. And again, he holds some nice long low breathy notes, gets a little bit of a crescendo on that F sharp. So he's got this G sharp, F sharp, which then becomes a motive which he then repeats by playing G natural, F natural, which are the next two notes. Let me move on. Okay, so on to the next line. Now, I've already talked about that G natural and the F natural as being sort of a development of the G sharp and the F sharp that he played in the previous line. Now the next little bit is a cool little motive development thing. Now I see the next 4 notes, D sharp, E, A, G sharp, as being a anacrusis, a lead-in to what comes next. Where he plays this ba-do-ba-da-da-da phrase, and then he repeats that phrase up the scale. So yeah, those first 4 notes I think are just sort of an introduction to the idea, and then the idea, and then the idea repeated. A couple of points to note: he accents the peak note, the highest pitch note in each of those phrases, that D note and the G note. And there's a couple of little grace notes which I haven't notated on the sheet of paper there, but the B in the first one, there's a little grace note that he plays in there. Now he's either doing being a trumpet, he's either doing a alternate fingering, double finger thing, half valve. I'm not quite sure how he's getting that particular. It's not really a grace note. It's just that there's a character to that note. And on the F, there's definitely like a little slide into that note. From a guitar player's perspective, it's a slide, but from a trumpet player's perspective, he's probably just valving that note a little late or something to get that extra grace note. Moving on to the next line. So now we have this really cool phrase. He sort of drags the phrase out and extends it. It starts off with this sharp 11, D sharp E, and that second D sharp E is really late. He's dragging, pulling on the time there, and then down the arpeggio, down through the sharp 4 to the 4. He's done that before. We've seen that way back in line 2, but this time he just keeps going down to the G sharp note, and he just holds that G sharp. Then there's a bar of nothing. On to the next line. So I've notated this as if he starts on beat 1, but he doesn't. It's so late, he's pulling the time back so far that it's almost like half a beat late. But if I notated it exactly, it would just look messy. And I think this is what he's thinking. He's thinking on the beat, but his sense of time is just pulling and just relaxing the time so much that it, in metronomically, is late. But it's not late as in like wrong. It's just late in the feel. So anyway, it's just this E flat D. Right, little phrase that he just repeats and repeats and repeats, and then he extends it. So he accelerates through the first bar and then drags in the next bar, and then he finishes the entire solo with this cool little arpeggio lick, followed by this one. And yeah, these are good examples of his feel, where it's really, really straight, almost staccato. He's not really shuffling or swinging this at all. All his eighth notes are pretty even throughout the entire solo, but he still manages to get that swing feel because of how he does his accenting. It's all in the detail of the phrasing. And interestingly, he finishes the solo on the 4, on the D in the key of A minor, but he sort of slides off that note very subtly right at the end. So there you go, that's my analysis of Vince Jones's trumpet, possibly flugel solo on the song Comes Love. I hope you enjoyed the video.